Hey, this is Brileth with Nox Game Studios, and today we are going to be starting our series on implementing multiplayer into Unity using Photon and Playfab. So first thing is we need to do is set up Photon in our Unity project. So here, if you go to photonengine.com, you'll be able to set up an account. So let's just go sign in, or you'll need to try Photon for free. So I'm going to go sign in, select my account. Remember me, I'm not a robot. And now let's sign in. So this is the dashboard that you'll sign into. If you are new to Photon and you just created an account, you won't see any other applications here. So all you need to do is go create an app, and we will use for the Photon type, we will do Photon Pun. For the application name, we will just do Nox. I will do. You can choose whatever you want. Game Studios Tutorial. And we'll say this is a tutorial using Photon in Unity. You can put a URL, but it is optional. And all we have to do now is hit create. So this will create a new block here that has an app ID. This app ID is important, and you should copy it now because we will use it later on when we install Photon into Unity. But here you can go to Analyze, Manage. So under Manage, you can do a few different things. You can set like the custom server, if you want to use Steam, Facebook, etc. But this is the part that I usually make a change to. It's this allow regions. And here I might allow a specific region or two, like EU or US or whatever you want. There's documentation on the different abbreviations for the regions you want to use. So now I've created a Unity project using 2019.4.8 F1. This is a long-term supported version of Unity that allows you to have this dark mode. So the first thing we're going to do is in this sample scene, let's just do save as. And I created a project underscore folder. And this is where I'm going to create everything that's for our project specifically. So I'm going to do a scenes, and I'm going to do main menu. And now I'm going to go to under assets, I'm going to go to the scene folder, and I'm just going to delete scenes. I like to keep all my project specific files under this underscore projects and assets, just so I can easily find it because it'll always be at the top. I've already gone and imported a whole bunch of art, audio, and fonts into this project. So now that we have our new scene, let's go into it and hit right click, create empty, and we're going to call this network controller. Under network controller, we're going to do another create empty, and we're going to do Photon. And underneath Photon, I'm going to create another empty, and we're going to call this connector. So in our underscore projects, let's go ahead and right click and create in a new folder, and we're going to call that code. So this is where all our code's going to exist, and inside of code, let's create another folder called Photon. And so in this directory is where all our specific Photon code is going to live. So now let's right click, create, and do our first C# script. And we're going to do this Photon connector. Let's go into our scene and click on connector and drag Photon connector as a component. Now that we've attached our Photon connector to our connector game object, we need to import Photon 2 into our project before we can start coding. So let's click on Asset Store. And if you don't have the Asset Store tab here, you can go to Windows Asset Store. So what we're going to do is search for pun2-free. So let's click on it. So this is a free option. It allows you to have 20 concurrent players without costing you any money. So let's hit import. While this imports, oh, that was quick. So what you can do once the import Unity package window pops up here is we're just going to hit import, but if you want to reduce the amount of code that's imported into yours, you can reduce it by unclicking some of these demo scenes. But I would include them just because you want to be able to see the example code that was written by exitkims. So let's hit import. So this is where we're going to use the app ID here in a second. Once this finishes importing, it will prompt up a wizard, and in that wizard we can paste in the app ID that we generated earlier inside of the photonengine.com. Now that the Photon package is finished importing, you'll see that this is what pops up, the pun wizard. And it's this setup, and it requests the app ID or email. So we're going to paste in the app ID that we set up earlier. We're going to do setup project, and now we have completed what the setup process. So we can hit close here. So you'll see that we now have some new files added to our assets folder. So by default, it takes you to this resources and scriptable object here. This is important. This will allow you to change and modify the Photon server settings. You'll see here's the app ID that we set up. But a couple things we want to do is, depending on what region you're from, I'm from the US, so I'm going to type in for fixed region, US, and for the dev region, US. The reason why I'm doing this is when I'm doing testing right now, I want to make sure that my standalone builds and my Unity builds will both be connecting to the same region in Photon, so then we can connect to the same master server. So now that we've imported this successfully, let's go back and look at our Photon folder and go to Photon connector, and let's open that script. So I'm using Visual Code for my developments, and these are the 3 different extensions that I use. I know a lot of people use Visual Studios. This is just an alternative lightweight version that you can use as well. So now that we're back, let's click back on the Explorer, and by default this is our boilerplate Unity code. So what am I going to do is I'm just going to delete everything here and start from scratch. So I want to do 3 things just because we're going to have a decent amount of code in here. I like to divide my code into different regions. So I'm going to have a Unity method region. I'm going to have a region for my private methods. And this is an optional step. This is just for me to stay sane. And then one for our public methods. And lastly, one for our Photon callbacks. And this is the region of our code that is going to be most populated with all these different callbacks we're going to be implementing. So let's save that. So the first method we will be implementing is the Unity start method. So in the start method, we're going to set a random name for the player connecting to Photon for now. We'll change this in the future, but for now we're just going to give it a random name. So I'm going to have it tester.gwid. This is just a way to get a unique name. Because a GUID will be unique always. It's got me to use a GUID though. We need to use using system. There we go. So after we set our random name, I want to connect to Photon, and I'm going to pass in the random name. So the reason why this is giving us issues is because we don't currently have a method called connect to Photon. So let's make one. So we're going to do private void connect to Photon string, and we're going to have the argument name as nickname, just because that is the terminology that Photon uses when it's connecting. So we're going to do a debug statement just so we can keep track of where we are when we're in the console, and we're going to do connect to Photon as, and we're just going to pass it. Say the nickname. So now we can do Photon network dot auth values So these are just basic authentication that we're going to do, and we're just going to pass in the nickname and the values here. And because this is giving us an issue here, what we need to do is include using Photon Pun. So now that we've done that, we can go Photon Network dot automatically sync scenes. So in this game, whenever the master client joins a scene, I want other clients that are connected to their same room to also join that room. And I think I missed an S. There we go. Authentication. Oh, the reason why this is complaining is because for authentication we need to use using Photon real-time as well. So now we have those two using statements. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit and remove the other using statements that aren't currently being used. So let's do Photon Network dot nickname equals the nickname that we passed in, and then Photon Network dot connect using settings. And these are the settings that we set up in the scriptable object we were looking at just a minute ago. And this is all we have to do. Now when we run this game, we will connect to the master server using the random nickname that's generated. But we want to implement some Photon calls to actually be able to proceed from here. And to do Photon callbacks, we need to not inherit from mono behavior, but actually inherit from mono behavior pun callbacks. Once we inherit from mono behavior pun callbacks, we can start implementing some callbacks here or overriding some callbacks. And the first one we want to do is public override void on connected to master. So this is the callback that happens when we connect to the master Photon server. So we're going to do debug.log just so we can keep saying, and we're going to say you have connected to the Photon master server. Once we connect to the Photon master server, what we want to do is check to see if we are in a Photon lobby or not. So basically, once you connect to a server, you want to connect to a lobby, and then from lobbies, you can connect to the different rooms that are inside the lobby. So what we're going to do is if not in a Photon network dot in lobby. So basically, this is saying if we are not in a Photon lobby, let's join a Photon lobby. So let's go Photon network dot join lobby, and it's as simple as that. But to verify that we've joined a Photon lobby, we now need to implement another Photon callback. And that Photon callback is on joined lobby. So let's do Photon or public override void on joined lobby. So debug.log, we don't need a $sign here. You have connected to a Photon lobby. You don't need the $sign there either. All right, now that we've connected to the Photon lobby, we want to actually create a room for ourselves. So let's do create Photon room, and we're just going to give it a name, test room. For now, we're just going to do a hard coding. This will all be dynamic in the future. So this right here is giving us another underline. That's because this is a method that doesn't exist yet. And this will be a private void create Photon room. This method will also need to take in a string room name. Once we do that, you can see our issues down here has been resolved. So to create a Photon room, we need a couple things. We need to set a room options variable, and we're just going to call room options ro equals new room options. So there's a few different things you can set, And let's look at that. So you can do if the room is open, if the room is visible, the different max players, and a few other things as well. Feel free to look through here. So we're just going to set is open to true. We're going to do ro.isVisible to true. And ro.maxPlayers equals 4. So what this means is our room will be open for other people to join. The room will be visible for others to be able to see it in room lists. And the max number of players we're going to allow is 4. So once we set up our room options, we can do Photon network.join or create room. To be able to call this method, you need to be connected to the Photon master server and a Photon lobby. So what we're going to do is pass in a string name, which is room name. And then the next expected parameter is a room options, which is RO. And then it is a typed lobby. So for this, we're just going to do typed lobby.default. And voila. That is all we need to do to actually create and or join a room. When we do this, it will do another Photon callback. That Photon callback, there will be 2 that actually kick off depending on if we create a room or create a room and join it, or we just join a room. So the first one we're going to implement is public override void on created room. So if we were the first person to join this room, or we will be the ones that are actually creating it. So let's do debug.log. You have created a Photon room named, and let's simply put the Photon name here. So Photon network dot local player, or actually we can do room, I think current room. There it is, current room dot name. So this will just be a nice little printout that we'll be able to verify that we joined it, or we created the room. So if you were to be the person that created the room, you will also have another callback called that we'll need to override, which is void on joined room. You have joined the room, the Photon room, and we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to copy and paste this. There you go. The next Photon callback method we want to implement is on join room failed. So let's do that now. Public override void on join room failed. And so this will pass in a return code and a message. So we will print out the message in a debug log. And for now, that's all we'll do in this one as well. So you failed to join a Photon room. And we'll print out the message. I'll do a colon here. All right, once we implemented this one, let's do the next one, which is on player entered room. So on player entered room is when another player enters the room you're currently in. So let's do public override void on player entered room. And this will give you the Photon player. And this is the photon.realtime.player. So what we will do is just a simple debug.log another player has joined the room. And we'll do new player dot user ID. So the next callback we will implement from Photon is on player left room. So this is when another player leaves the current room you're in. So on player left, it's not gonna help me. Public override void on player left room debug.log player has left the room other player dot user ID. The next callback method we want to implement is public override void on master client switch. So what this method is when the master client in the room leaves, the room will automatically switch the master client to another person in that room. And that other person that is now the master client is passed in here as the new master client. So let's do debug.log. We'll say new master client is, and we'll do new master client dot user ID. And for the last Photon callback we want to implement around joining and leaving rooms is actually the on left room. So I'm going to put that up here. And this method is when the current player, so you, has left a Photon room. So on left room, and we'll do a debug statement on. I'll say you have left a Photon room. And so this is all the code that we need to at least get our project started. So now let's switch back to Unity and go to our scene or game view and just hit play. Once that's actually playing, let's go to our console, and now we can actually see everything that's happening. So first step was we generated a random tester. Then we connected to the Photon master server. Once we connected to the Photon master server, we're connecting to a Photon lobby. We were creating or joining a Photon room. So you can see we have two methods now. The first one is you have created the Photon room test room. And then we also got the Photon callback method of you have joined the Photon room test room. So that will wrap us up with getting the project started. If this video helped you out, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also, join our Discord if you have any questions or requests for additional videos. There will be an invite link to the Discord below, along with some extra resources. I will be putting out the next video shortly on how to implement Playfab into your project. Future videos will include how to build a friend and party invite system, recent players list, a simple store, how to store stats into Playfab for a player, leaderboards, and much more. I want to thank you for watching, and have a good one.